Hey, John.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's a beautiful sunny day, 70
Mhm.
degrees, and this is my time of year, this weather.
Yeah, wonderful. So you're getting to work from home today, or are you at Kessler?
I am getting to work from home today. I work on Wednesdays and Fridays, and
Hmm.
so today is a day off. And I don't know about you, but I don't do so well in the really bad heat. And we're coming off a summer that was brutal, so I spent most
Yeah.
of my time in with the air conditioning.
Same for me. I talk to a lot of people with spinal cord injury who are cold constantly, but I also have the issue with overheating. So for me, once I overheat, oh, it's game over.
Yeah, I get the whole dysreflexia thing. I start to get like my blood pressure tanks, and I have to be sitting down, or else it's going to be a problem. So I try not to put myself in that position any longer. I've had enough years in this game that I know when I can start to do some things, and then when I just have to sit this dance out.
Yeah. I do feel very lucky for the way my dysreflexia works though, because I'm fairly sensitive. My body responds very strongly to stimuli, but it lets me know as soon as I feel that dysreflexia. I might not know what's wrong, but I know something is. So I
Yes.
know to stop and listen. I've
Yep.
learned that a lot through research studies at Kessler. I'm in one right now for blood pressure. And I've found out through Dr. Forrest that my body is incredibly sensitive to change.
Very cool. Yeah, to learn. You
Yeah.
live and learn something new every day, right, Laura?
Yeah, it's my favorite part about being in research studies is that you get to learn so much more about your body. And, my post injury body is not even in the same ballpark as my pre injury body. So it's good to learn.
It's amazing. We have a whole new world.
Right. And you just passed your 32nd anniversary of your injury. So that is, I can't even imagine the changes that you've seen along the way.
Quite the milestone. Well, first and
Hmm.
foremost, one of the big changes is when I was an inpatient, I was at Kessler for almost 5 months, and that
Hmm.
was nothing. That was just like a run of the mill. And now, working there for the last 4 years or so, I mean, if
Hmm.
someone's there for 5 weeks, that's like, whoa, this person really got a good run, because I know the insurance companies are really dogged with getting people in and out. But I don't know how people can have a life altering injury like you and I and those of us, those others listening today, can commiserate with how they could have that happen to them and then be sent home within a month to maybe a month and another week or so. To me, it's untenable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think both physically and mental health wise, I think having a longer stay inpatient makes a really big difference because it takes a long time to adjust and wrap your head around everything going on. So those shorter stays are scary.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody talks about the physical. Like, everybody wants to know, especially when you're watching television shows. Like,
Mhm.
I can remember back in the day, my mom watching the soap operas when I was a kid, and I would walk by the room and I'd hear, "Oh, so and so is in a car accident. Are they going to walk? Are they going to walk?" All he wants to know is if someone's going to walk, and
Yep.
of course, it's huge. People want to walk, but
Mhm.
nobody ever says like, "Hey, are they going to be able to dress themselves? Are they going to be able to feed
Yeah.
themselves? Are they going to be able to brush their teeth?" I mean, things that
Mhm.
everybody take for granted is just something that, people don't think about, which is unfortunate.
No, they don't. And I also never realized until my injury, now that I watch TV and movies, I never realized how often people use that as a trope to get emotional reactions of just, oh no, I can't feel my legs or, something like that. It's like that, it's used really often and it's very triggering.
It is. It is. And it's something that you don't know until you know. Right, Laura? I
Mhm.
mean, how many times did you watch things? And I used to watch things before my spill.
Right.
And you never think about it until you know. I always say, you
Right.
don't know until that tree falls in your backyard, if you know what I mean, and you're the
Mhm.
one laying in the bed, or helping someone who's laying in the bed that you find out in a hurry.
Right. And, I think it's fascinating for those of us who have injuries from very normal things. You had a fall, I had a car accident. Those things suddenly become very triggering for us, and we see them constantly on TV, in movies, in real life. I know that for me, every time I see a car accident on TV or I hear an ambulance go by my house, it's something that immediately kicks in my panic response. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that'll get better over time, but it's a
It
lot.
certainly does. I can recall there was there was an ad campaign on television for, I forget what it was, but the recurring theme was that somebody would fall down a flight of steps and then they'd be at the bottom and, oh ho ho, sort of laughing it off. And I would always cringe because that's exactly what happened to me. And so I forget what that company was, but I'll never buy their product.
No.
I
No,
never
and
want.
it's, I think, and a lot of people make light of those things because they just have no idea how close it could be. And I think that's where you get some of the weird encounters with people out in the world, because I think it scares people to see people like us, because it kind of shows them their mortality a little.
It does. Yeah. I mean, like,
Hmm.
again, we were talking before this about all the cliches about how life
Hmm.
is fragile and you can't take anything for granted. And these are all catchphrases that are easy to throw around when there's nothing wrong with you, when you're able bodied and when things are going well. But
Hmm.
when, you have something that's happened to both of us, it takes on a whole new meaning. And you really, you almost become, I remember I was
Hmm.
24 years old when I had my accident,
Hmm.
and immediately I went from 24 to like 124 because I used to tell my friends that would come in the room, I'd say, wear your seatbelts and don't do something stupid. Don't dive off the side of the pool. Put your legs first and, do
Hmm.
this. It was almost like, John, do you want us to bubble wrap ourselves? I mean, we have to live our lives. But, I felt like a
Hmm.
grandfather giving out this advice, this sage advice to these
Hmm.
younger people. And then little did I know I was still 24 at the time. But you really do.
Right.
You find a whole new, meaning
Hmm.
for taking things for granted and not taking things for granted.
Right. I mean, you only get one body, and it's, I'm all for, living your life and taking risks and, making the most of it, but try to take those risks with a modicum of safety and common sense.
Yeah. You really
Yeah.
do. You have to. You have to. There's got to
Hmm.
be a balance there where you're having fun, but you're not living on the edge. And I guess that's one thing that over the years in talking with fellow injured patients that I remember there were guys that were with me at Kessler at the same time. And one night we were all in the rotunda, and the subject came up, was the topic of the night was, how did you get hurt? First and foremost, and how do you
Hmm.
feel about that? And there were some guys that were motorcycle accidents and some guys that were just had been drinking, and I just came around to the thought that I would look at myself so much differently if what I did contributed to the situation that I'm in right now. And mine was I don't even recall walking up the stairs, and I don't recall falling down them. I felt sick one evening. It was
Hmm.
a hot summer night, and I was sleeping in the basement of my house. And I just remember waking up and I didn't feel good. So I thought, I better get ready to go upstairs and tell my parents maybe we should go to the hospital because I don't feel well. And I remember walking over to the stairs and feeling faint. So I got down close to the floor. And the next thing I recall, Laura, is wiping away some blood from the corner of my eye. I must have hit my head on the floor. From there, I don't remember walking up. I don't remember falling down, but there were drips of blood all the way up the steps. And so it was something that I myself didn't contribute to. And
Hmm.
so I almost kind of feel like if it was something that I did that was stupid, that
Hmm.
robbed me of this great body that I had been given, that I had so much left to do with, that I would have a different outlook on, these last 30 years and whether I basically put myself in this position.
Hmm.
I don't know
No,
if you've ever thought about something like that.
I definitely have, because for me it was a car accident. I wasn't the one driving, and so it's not, it's not something I did to myself. It's something that somebody else's recklessness that did it. And I think that is, so you have the main types of either someone else did this to you, or something that a choice that you made caused it,
Right.
or it was a freak accident like yours. And those are really the three main causes. I can't think of any other things that would happen, and
Yeah.
I think those would each have massively different mental health repercussions.
Without a doubt, without it, and
Hmm.
that going around the circle with the guys that I was with was
Hmm.
basically the main theme was that some of the guys felt that they had contributed to where they were and were just beating themselves up about it. And
Hmm.
I think I would do the same thing. I mean, like you said before, we were
Yeah.
blessed with these great bodies. And,
Hmm.
it's not like we were all, star athletes with these bodies or, musicians or whatever, but they worked for us, right? They got
Yeah.
us through many years and we really um, got a lot of good use out of them. And now that, they're not working like they used to,
Hmm.
the fact that we didn't contributed to that plight, to our plight, is something that I know I sleep easier in that respect.
Yeah, and I think even so though, in with my accident, I was asleep in the car when it happened, and I even still had thoughts right after my accident of, God, why did I fall asleep? If I just hadn't fallen asleep, maybe I could have told him not to drive that way. Maybe I could have noticed that he was speeding or looking at his cell phone. And I always think things like that. It took me a while to kind of stop and go, you could not have stopped this.
Exactly.
There's
Yeah,
there's no reason for you to beat yourself up and to think that somehow you could have controlled this.
sure.
These things happen, and that's life, and life isn't fair.
That's why they're called accidents, right, Laura?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so I think that's another thing about being inpatient at Kessler, and everybody likes to ask me, what was it like to be there? Is it, because it's one of the best facilities in the country, and I've always told them that it's the physical therapist and the occupational therapist that make all the difference
Yeah.
because they care so much, and they
Yep.
helped me so much in figuring out just how to approach it properly.
Without a doubt. I just recorded a show with one of our star OTs at Kessler, Denise Diesner, and I told her that I was drawn to her not only because she loves my service dog Yoki, and she would chase us down the hallway
Mhm.
whenever Yoki was around, but she had all the traits that a really good therapist need, and
Mhm.
that's empathy,
Yes.
and positivity,
Mhm.
and not sympathy, but you could tell that she just really cares about people. And when you walk in the room, uh, she walked in the room. She's not someone that's just like, all right, here's my 1 o'clock from 1 to 2. I got to deal with John, or I'm working with Laura. But you could see that
Mhm.
she really just really got down on our level and cared about us as a human being before
Mhm.
even tackling what our injury was and what we were going to work on, what goals we had for that day. And so
Yeah.
it's so important. It really is. And some folks have it and other folks don't. I mean, I'm sure you had some PTs and
Mhm.
OTs and doctors and whatnot over your time frame where they
Mhm.
just really didn't have that sort of thing. And it can
Mhm.
get you off on the wrong foot right at the start.
Yeah, it happens, and I think I actually did work with Denise a couple of times, and she was great. I think that's the wonderful thing about getting to work with a PT or OT that understands it and treats you well is that you get to feel, I don't want to say like your old self again, but you get to feel like a whole person again.
Yeah.
You get to feel respected. You get to feel like all of your opinions or feelings about these things matter. And, you feel a lot stronger and able to handle these things.
Yeah, you don't feel like, oh, the poor soul laying in the bed that
Hmm.
had this horrendous thing happen to them that's now changed the trajectory of the rest of their life. Because some people can
Yeah.
make you feel that way, and it's not good.
Wow. I
It's
mean, I
those.
was I was surprised even with medical personnel, not people who are specifically trained in spinal cord injury, but nurses or doctors or things like that who say, oh, so any progress with your legs?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's not going to happen for
Come
me.
on, right? Very
Yeah.
true. I used to
Hmm.
laugh with some of my friends that some of the doctors that I've had through the year, and I've had a million of them over all this
Hmm.
time. Some of them I would joke had the bedside manner of a bedpan, and it was just some
Hmm.
people you jibe with, and other people you just don't, and some people get it, and others don't. I remember a funny thing you mentioned about people asking you about how the walking was going. I remember when I was at the acute care hospital, I would have friends that would come in to visit me, and they didn't know any better. But the first thing they would want to do is, "Hey, John, how you doing?" And they'd reach out to shake my hand. And here I am, central cord, which means my upper
Hmm.
body, arms, hands, and fingers just really don't work at all. And
Right.
so I'm looking at them like, "Yeah, what do you think I'm going to do here? I can't reach out and shake your hand." And it was
That's
like, but they
right.
don't know
So
any better.
how do you handle that? Because I always get really uncomfortable and people want to shake my hand as well because I know that it's going to be more uncomfortable for them in a moment than me when they go to shake my
Yeah.
hand and it's paralyzed.
What I try to do is I just kind of do like a fist bump. I'll try
Hmm.
to, and because I can't, I really can't lift my arms and shoulders. And I mean, everything is just basically locked up. For those
Right.
of you out there that don't know, central cord syndrome is basically the central part of our spinal cord is responsible for our fine motor, arms, hands, and fingers, so upper body stuff. And at the cervical level, I'm a C3-4, so I'm really high. And I just really severely bruised my cord. And so they told me early on, and they were pretty spot on, Laura. They said, John, you're going to walk. There's no doubt we think you're going to walk, but you'll have little to no use of your uppers. And so think of yourself as an upside down para, meaning, you know, a paraplegic has no use of their legs. You'll have really no use of your upper body and arms. And so early on, it used to really spook me out when people would try to shake my hand, because not only can I not lift my arm to shake, I can't open, my hands are pretty much fisted up most of the time. I don't know if you have that situation where
Mhm.
your hands don't really open up. So I couldn't shake a hand anyway. So I just started doing the fist bump, and that's what I go with now. That's my go-to move.
Yeah, no, that's a smart, because I remember with COVID happening, I was actually going, oh, I'm kind of glad that handshakes are going to go away, because I mean it's very germy anyhow. But then once I got
Yeah.
injured, I remember people started shaking hands again, and I just went, oh, I was hoping that was go away just to
Oh,
ease
yeah.
the awkwardness for me. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I think that it's probably confusing for people because your particular condition is pretty rare.
It is, yeah. And again, I like to tell people I can get up and walk pretty much wherever I want to go. I just can't do anything once I get there, because I really and truly have no
Mhm.
use of these guys. My both of my arms, they should be getting disability benefits as well, because they don't really do anything on the job. But
Mhm.
yeah, so that's sort of like my de facto, you know, default is that I can get up and go anywhere. But I
Yeah.
just have, I really don't have use of them. So, um, it's
Mhm.
tough. It really is a weird thing. That was another conversation that we used to have in the rotunda. I know things
Mhm.
are a lot different now. When I was at Kessler, and this is going back
Mhm.
32 years ago, nobody
Right.
stayed in their room. I mean, nobody was in their room. We were always
Oh,
out in the rotunda. And by rotunda, I mean the room where the fish tank is. That's
yeah.
basically where Kessler ended. There was no other
Mhm.
side there to get to the new building where you were housed
Right.
as an inpatient. So we stopped pretty much right about there. So we were all in there, and there was instead of the fish tank, there was a big TV that was right there, and we used to all watch TV. So
Mhm.
invariably, the conversation would go, "All right, would you rather have? Would you rather walk, or would you rather have use of your upper body?" And so it
Oh,
was like,
disability
"Oh,
would you rather?
yeah,
It's everybody plays it.
mix and match, right? Which would you rather be?" And I actually
Mhm.
had a friend who was still a friend to this day, and we used to joke. He was like a C4 quad in a chair, but he didn't use a power chair. He used to propel himself with his arms. He was strong enough to do his arms, and
That's
he
incredible.
was fascinated with me, the fact that I could get up and walk. And all those years ago, Laura, I was a lot more high functioning than I am now, because I'm 56. 24 has turned into 56, and I'm finding out really in a serious way that aging with a spinal cord injury is really no joke. But
Mhm.
back in the day, I mean, I was walking really well. And I mean, you could see there was something wrong because my arms wouldn't sway when I would walk. And so
Mhm.
he was fascinated by that. So he used to call me, my nickname was Point Five, which was, I'm only half of, like, a cripple was the word he used to use at the time.
Oh
You're only
gosh.
half of a cripple because you could walk and all of this. So I was Point Five for all those years. God love Joe Fabio. But yeah, I mean, it was really weird. I would get looks like, I would see
Mhm.
people that would be in their wheelchair, and folks
Mhm.
would just know, okay, they obviously can't walk. Something has happened to them. But I would
Mhm.
sort of walk in the room, and I would get looks like, like, what is this guy's deal? Like, I
Yeah.
see there's something wrong with him, but I don't really know. But is there something wrong? And
Mhm.
so that was sort of unnerving. And things like that. I don't know, for you, like with your emotions, does that affect your
Mhm.
tone? Because I know with me, when I get nervous or when I get anxious or whatever, my tone just goes through the roof.
Yeah, in terms of spasticity for me, fatigue tends to really play a role. So I get my legs have a lot more spasms later on in the day and things like that. My nerve pain is definitely affected by stress.
Okay.
So if I'm incredibly nervous or I'm about to go to an event or something like that, because it's still a little weird for me to be in an event full of non-disabled people,
Yeah.
because I already felt short. I was 5'4", but before this, I already felt short, and now I feel very small. So being in a room full of everyone standing up is a little claustrophobic for me. Um,
Absolutely.
But yeah, so ahead of that, I usually try to do whatever I can to try to relax and chill out a little bit before going in there, because otherwise nerve pain's going to kick up, and that just opens up Pandora's box.
Yeah, and for me, as I said, like when I think, and oftentimes I could be my own worst enemy, and I'm sure people can relate to it. But you think that people are looking at you because you're
Yeah.
different, and you might. And for me, like walking, I looked funny, and
Hmm.
when I would feel that, and I would put that extra pressure on myself, the tone in my legs would skyrocket, making it that much harder for me to walk. So it was like at that point I was like the Tin Man. I needed some oil, and it would make me
Hmm.
worse than it was. And especially when I would meet new people, and it was hard. It took me a long time for
No,
many
of
years to get
course.
used to that, and it because it would just make things like I didn't want to go out and meet new people. I didn't want to put myself in positions where I was going to have to be around people that didn't know
Hmm.
who I was and who what my deal is. And that's why
Yeah.
working at Kessler and being around Kessler, where I'm just John, and that's just
Hmm.
fine. Like everybody knows my deal, and there's a lot
Hmm.
of people like you and me there, and nobody is casting aspersions, and nobody is looking at anybody differently. It's a place full of people in
Right.
wheelchairs and people with rollators and people with canes, and
Hmm.
it's sort of a safety net, like a safe spot for us. I know I certainly feel comfortable there. I'm sure you do as well.
I do, and it's also, I think the closer you are to a major metropolitan area really helps, because the farther you go away from a major city, the less people tend to see anyone who's disabled. And so I think that, that little bit of extra sheltering tends
Yeah.
to mean a lot more weird encounters.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've noticed that. You even go just an hour south of where we are now, and it's totally different.
I
So
can imagine, yeah. And I don't know
yeah.
about you, but I really had zero interaction with the disabled community before becoming disabled myself. I mean, I had been to college.
Yeah.
I graduated from college, and I was out working in the world, and I really did not have much experience at all
Uh-huh.
until it was me laying on the mat, and I can't wiggle my toes, and I'm surrounded by people.
Interesting.
Yeah. And back then we also were all sort of grouped together, so it was folks
Hmm.
with like us with spinal cord injury, but then laying next to us on the mat were people that had had strokes, and we had
Yeah.
amputees. And so I was like thrust into this world of, like, I remember the first day I was there. I'm laying on the mat. There's a guy taking his prosthetic leg off, and his wound was new and fresh. And it was like, oh my God, I'm looking at this gaping wound in his knee. And then next to
Mhm.
me were two senior citizen women who had had strokes that were playing badminton with a balloon, and every time that they would swing the racket I could hear their diapers crinkling, and I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, what has my life morphed into?
Well, and as a 24-year-old man, I mean, no one's ready for this life, but I feel like as a 24-year-old man, that would be particularly challenging,
uh,
because
yeah, it was
that's just a
like,
really weird time in life to suddenly have to do a pivot.
yeah, and it was like, I was on an episode of the Twilight Zone. I just kind of kept
Hmm.
thinking, like, all right, I'm going to go to sleep one night, I'm going to wake up, and I'm going to be doing what I did before. And I'm still
Yeah.
waiting for that night to wake up the next day and have everything go back. It certainly hasn't gone back there yet.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting that you actually had a conversation with somebody early on where they explained, okay, you're going to walk, but it's going to be a little different. You're not going to have much for, strength in your upper body. I really didn't get that conversation of, here's what you're looking at, here's your diagnosis, here's what is going to happen to you,
Mm-hmm.
until I was inpatient at Kessler. Nobody in the hospital. I was in the hospital for the first month,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think I'd been at Kessler for a week or two
Right.
before my OT just kind of went, okay, so I think we need to do a reality check.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was, yeah, the fact that I didn't get that conversation until 6 weeks into my injury is a little strange to
Now,
me.
did
I feel like
did
I
you
maybe should have known earlier.
right? Did you have surgery? Did they have to do any surgery to stabilize anything with you?
Hmm. Yeah, I did anterior and posterior fusion.
Okay.
I did anterior fusion in Spain, and then apparently that's all they do. They just go in, put everything in the right spots, and close you back up. And then it's about a 50-50 shot that you'll heal correctly.
Wow. Wow.
So
Wow.
that's
Wow.
socialized medicine for you. And
Yeah.
then I came back to the US and they said, okay, had you had that surgery here, we would have done it all at the same time. We would have done the posterior fusion. So it's up to you now. And so they
Yeah.
gave me that choice. And I chose to go ahead and have it because it gives you a lot more stability in your neck throughout your life.
You're good.
But man, that surgery is rough.
I know. That's what they did for me. They went through the front. They couldn't do anything in the back.
Oh,
So they
okay.
went through the front for me, and they were able to take a bone took a graft from my hip, and they put a
Oh,
bone in there. And they wanted to try and put some plates, but it was just too narrow in there. And
interesting.
so, yeah, they did that. And then, like you, I didn't really know. They didn't give me that prognosis about the walking and all of that until I had gotten to Kessler too. So they didn't know
Wow,
what to make of me at the acute care hospital. Again, this is back
interesting.
in 1992. And so I don't know whether, spinal cord injury, I know there's still not enough out there about it. There's not enough funding. There's not enough this and that as far as spinal cord injury goes. And now you're talking 30 some odd years ago. And so they really didn't know what they had with me, I remember. And so
Mm-hmm.
after I had my surgery and got stabilized and I got to Kessler, that's when I struck up a relationship with the great Dr. Stephen Kirschblum, who not only has been my doctor for all these years, but he's also been a mentor and a dear friend. And he's the one that sort of took me under his wing and told me what he thought was going to happen. And as I said, he was pretty
Mm-hmm.
spot on from that first day that we met.
That's great. No, and I've gotten to meet Dr. Kirschblum. He's very kind, and that's wonderful that you were able to work with him, from the beginning, because he's been on the cutting edge of it since 30 years ago.
He's the best. And a cute story there. My first night there, they bring me in. I'm in my room, and I heard there's a knock on the door, and we said, "Come in." And there was a woman said, "I'm Dr. Carsonik. I'll be your doctor." And the funny thing was, Laura, that her stomach came in the room about 5 minutes before she did. She was so pregnant that she was sticking out so far. And so she said, "I'll be back tomorrow morning. We'll get you down to therapy. We'll get you going. And, we're going to get this thing started." So the next morning rolls around and there's a knock on the door. And we said, "Come in." And we hear, "Hi, I'm your doctor." And I was like, "Wait a minute, that's a deep man's voice." I'm like, "What are we talking about here?" And I was
Mm-hmm.
behind the curtain. They were getting me dressed. We had curtains back in the day. So they
Mm-hmm.
were getting me dressed behind the curtain, and this head pops in, and it's Dr. Kirschblum. And he said, "John, I just wanted to introduce myself. Dr. Karsnick, who was in to see you last night, gave birth about 3 hours before she left your room. So you're stuck with me," was the way he put it. And little did I know that I had just pulled the Powerball ticket because I
Yeah.
was getting to work with him, who, as you said, is on the cutting edge of everything, and he speaks
Mm-hmm.
all over the globe. He's just a font of information in spinal cord rehab, and he's just one of those voices that is worldwide as a go-to when you want to talk about SCI.
Yeah, and I think that's the strangest thing about this particular injury is that we know so little about it. I feel like, of course everybody's learned a lot in the last few decades, but even so, it's such a big mystery.
Yeah,
And there are so many studies going on that seem to be making great progress, but I've definitely gotten advice from many people saying, everyone's going to try to tell you the cure is right around the corner. And everyone's been saying that now since the 70s. So,
right. It's true. Like we joked about beforehand, I guess our advice to people out there is if you're going to have a spinal cord injury, make sure you do it in like 50 years so that they can get a lot of the kinks out and get these studies that they're doing and
mhm,
fine tune some things. Even though there's some exciting stuff that's
mhm,
here and now with the stimulus, spinal stimulation stuff is
mhm,
something that I would really like to get involved in, and it sounds like it's promising with certain things. But the word chronic and spinal cord injury, I guess it means a long time since your accident, and mine is three decades now, and I hear a lot of the doctors and a lot of the folks whenever I see online or see some studies either on Twitter or Instagram or some of the social media platforms is that they're dealing with people who are like 6 months in or a year in or
mhm,
2 years in. And I'm like, "Hey, can you see me down here? I'm still in this game. I'm still in this
mhm.
fight. Do you have anything for, some old fogies like me?" But I understand there are some promising things that are out there, and hopefully they can continue to move the ball forwards for in my lifetime and your lifetime, and for those folks who are unfortunately destined to have something like this happen to them in their future.
I think what is frustrating about certain aspects of research is that a lot of it is focused on walking. A lot of it is focused on, trying to improve mobility, where, those of us who are living with this as a chronic, condition, walking is the least of the issue. And we would much
Right.
rather have improvements in bladder and bowel and blood pressure and all sorts of other things that would help our daily lives so much. And it's tough because most people don't even know those things are a problem. And that's why they don't get funding. And ugh.
Very true. And I have to tell you, I interviewed a gentleman out in San Diego. He was injured also in a car accident, in a freak car accident. He too was asleep, and it's a little more involved than that. But he nothing. He didn't contribute to it at all. And he's been in the game. He's a para. He's been doing
Mhm.
this now, I think, a little bit longer than me, maybe 35 years or so. And he said, you know something, John, to me, recovery is not walking again. It's just not. He said, to me, recovery is getting back to balance in my life, to getting back to really healthy relationships with my friends, to becoming a good contributing member of society, to get back to and feeling good about myself. And I was like, whoa, that is so profound. It almost brought me to tears because, as you say, so many people are like, are you going to walk? Is he going to walk? You got to walk.
Mhm.
But it's not. I mean, these injuries are so much more involved, at least in my aspect,
Mhm.
mentally than it is physically. I mean, we're robbed of so much physically, but it's the
Mhm.
mental aspect that can either send you down the rabbit hole from which you never come back from, or can put you into doing something productive, like you're doing with the
Mhm.
10% community and what so many other people are doing to try and help others who have unfortunately been befallen by these spinal cord injuries.
Right. And I think that's a great insight that while our bodies may have become broken in our injuries, recovery is really just getting back to the place where you don't feel, broken in your soul, broken in your mind, and that you can kind of move forward and find a way to get your life back to what you want it to be, back
Yeah.
to something feeling purposeful.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done. I mean, it takes a
Hmm.
long time. And there's certain days where maybe you fall off the wagon, to use a
Hmm.
colloquialism for,
Hmm.
and you don't have that. You don't have that balance. And you feel like, you know what, and you don't feel, healthy and wanted a viable, even human being at some points. I know there's some days where I get up and I get to the side of the bed and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do
Hmm.
this. I really don't
Yeah.
know if I can do this. And I know that the day is just starting. And it's like, oh my dear God, I need some help. You got to help me out here because
Yeah.
things are rough. And you know that the day, and again, at that point, it's 7 a.m. and you got the whole rest of the day to deal with.
Hmm. And yeah, there are definitely some days where you wake up and just go, "Oh, I have to do this again?
Yeah.
Get a break or
Yeah.
something?"
Hmm.
But no, unfortunately, we don't get a break from it. And
No. And
I'm I'm wondering when you were injured 32 years ago and you were at Kessler, it sounds like you sort of all made your own support group. Was there any sort of focus on getting mental health services to people in inpatient?
you know something? I don't recall it being very much, if there was. I know that there was some psychologists that were there, and I have
Hmm.
to tell you, um, as the peer mentoring coordinator at Kessler now, what we do is we offer individuals who are now inpatients who've had terrible things happen to them the ability to speak to someone who has been in their shoes and has sort of been there and done that and is living in the community again and has figured out what life is like. And I have to tell you that if were that offered to me as the 24-year-old laying in my bed or sitting in the wheelchair, I probably would have said, I'm good. I don't need that. I don't want to deal with it because to me, in a way, it would have been almost saying like, hey, everything's going to be great. Life is going to be
Hmm.
super again, and you're going to jump back in and have the time of your life. And I know that now that's not the case, and that's not what we tell people, and it's not what we counsel them on. Basically, to me, a good mentor is a good listener. We go in the room and explain who we are and what we've been through, and basically just put the ball in their court, and whatever they want to talk about is we could be a sounding board and offer advice and some things that we have been through. But I don't recall it really being a driving force when I was there. One thing we did have, which is completely different now, is I know they call it lunch and learn now, where we do the week long studies and speeches. The first one is introduction to spinal cord injury, and then we have a lecture on skin management and skin care, and then we have bowel and bladder, and then we have transition to home. That's something now is done. When you were there, I'm sure it was done all on Zoom because it was still COVID and there was
Yep.
still a lot. They didn't want to be people in the same room, and we would bring down an iPad and say, like, do you want to, like, Laura, do you want to take part in today's thing? We're going to be talking about this. And you had the right to say, no, I'm good. I don't want to do that. When I was an inpatient, there was no, hey, John, do you want to take part? Your butt was going to be down there. They would wheel us down. We were all in one main conference room. And I have to say, thank goodness for that, because I still fall back on lessons that I learned back then. And it was a lot longer than 1 week. I mean, it was every day for a couple of weeks. And I still hearken back to things that I learned all those years ago. So that's something that's different from when I was there to what is happening today.
Yeah, I do remember taking part in that, and it was the iPad that got brought down every day. And a lot of the information was helpful, but I there's so much more information that could have been shared. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember particularly for the one on skin, they talked about the different ways in which you can have skin injuries and, just have pressure ulcers or shearing injuries. And so that was really interesting. And I know that at that time I'd never even heard of shearing injuries.
Right.
And since then I've learned a lot more about pressure ulcers and how they work and things like that. But it's super scary, and it's the kind of thing that, especially early on in your injury, when you don't know how dangerous those things are, you're really prone to it. And so
Yeah.
it's that amount of knowledge is so invaluable.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right?
hmm And some people are more prone to it than others. I've been very lucky with my skin, but I've spoken to other people who just a wrinkle in the sheets can cause them to have a wound start up.
Can you imagine? I mean, thinking about that before you had your injury, to
Yeah.
think something as trivial as a wrinkle in your sheets could
hmm
wreak such havoc on people. I mean, in what
No.
realm of possibility is that a reality? It's just these injuries are just we like to joke sometimes, the gift that keeps on giving, because it's always something. It is
hmm
always something new, and so they never cease to amaze.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of thing that a peer mentor would be so useful for, to just, as you're sort of speaking, stop and be like, hey, we've been talking for 30 minutes. What should you be doing right now?
Right.
Taking
Exactly.
a pressure break? Yeah.
Yeah, you need to do a weight shift, and you need to teach your
hmm
friends and family how to help you with those things, because you're going to
hmm
need them. And that's one thing. Another reason why the lunch and learn and what I went through all those
hmm
years ago is so important is because at some point you're going to have to fly the coop, and
hmm
insurance is going to push you out the door. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can't hit the call bell and have
hmm
so and so come down and do roll you over, or help
hmm
if your night bag is kinked and it's backing up, and or if you need a weight. That just doesn't happen. I mean, that falls on mom or dad or
hmm
significant other or brother and sister, or maybe a highly paid home health aide. I mean, those
Yeah.
certainly are not cheap, but
No.
it's not going to be the call bell. So you better listen up, and you better know what you're
hmm
doing, and take those lessons home with you, because it's so important.
Right. And to learn how to be an advocate for yourself is so important, because
Mm.
eventually you're going to end up knowing more about your body and your disability than most doctors and nurses you're going to come into contact with. So
Without
you need to
question.
be able to advocate for yourself and to educate others who are working with you.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a really tough skill to develop.
It is, but we have no choice. It kind of
hmm
falls on our head. We have to, survive, adapt, and survive, or what is
hmm
survive and adapt sort of a thing, where it's like,
Yeah.
one bit of advice. I saw one of the questions that you had sent across was, did you ever fall back on, some advice that was really germane to your situation all those years
Right.
ago? And it was one of the first days that I had occupational therapy. And I don't know about you, but I had no idea what occupational therapy was. To me, it was like, PT and physical therapy. Yeah, I kind of had some idea what that was going to be all about. But OT, no chance. And my first OT, who's one of my dear friends to this day, and she lives about a mile and a half from where I'm sitting right now, which is cool, was her name is Dawn, Texas, and she told me, John, you're going to have to learn there's more than one way to skin a cat. And at first I was like, what are you talking about? But I knew you used to do
Yeah.
things a certain way, and now unfortunately your body doesn't work the way it used to. So you're
Hmm.
going to have to find new ways to do the same things. And it was like, all right, she's onto something, and
Yeah.
it's so true. I mean, I'm sure you're doing things completely different now that your
Mhm.
body isn't working the way it used to, and you find them out, you live and learn. I mean, people can make suggestions, and what may work for John McAleavey might not work for Laura Taylor, and
Mhm.
and for the next person down the line. But we come up with things that work on our behalf, and sometimes I look around and think, that's pretty good. I don't know how I came up with that, but son of a gun, I'm
Yeah.
getting stuff done.
And that is, I think, one of the most fascinating parts of the disability community is that we have to be so creative to find new ways to live our lives, and that being able to share that with each other is such a game changer. And
Yeah.
so that's our biggest hope for the 10% is that there are so many different industries that cater to one specific disability. If you can get all of the different disabilities together, guaranteed, even if you don't have the same issue, you're going to have found similar ways to handle things and you're going
Yeah.
to have different ideas that are going to help somebody.
Yeah. And the other bit of really good advice that I got early on was that, John, at this point, as hard as it is, you cannot dwell on what does not work for you any longer, but you need to
Mm-hmm.
accentuate what still does. And I joke
Mm-hmm.
nowadays that I'm recording a podcast. For me, it's my big mouth. So I use my voice and I use my mouth and I try to use
Mm-hmm.
my communications background to try and not only help people, but to sort of move the ball along. And it's so true. I mean, if you mourn what doesn't work for you anymore, we can all go down, as I mentioned before, a rabbit hole. We can all go down that rabbit hole and spend however long you want to, mourning, the fact that we can't run 6 miles or swim in the ocean or do certain things. But that doesn't help. Early on,
Yeah.
somebody said, John, if hiding in the closet and crying all day long would make me better, clear me out a spot and I'll meet you in that closet and let's get the Kleenex out and we'll cry together. But it just doesn't get your situation better. So why wallow in it? And that was just my way of saying,
Yeah.
like, I can't do it. I gotta wake up I like to say I wake up on the sunny side of the street every day, even though life is rough. But there's only one way to do it. And that's the way I like to go.
Right. And I found, I'm sure it might change, over the years and things like that, but I had the hardest time earlier in my injury that a lot of people in my life were talking about all these potential cures out there and, ways that maybe, oh, once spinal shock wears off, maybe everything's going to be fine and
Right.
all these different things. And so I finally had to just go, I can't think that way.
Yeah.
I need to think about this week, this month, what I can accomplish tomorrow.
Yeah.
I can't think about next year. I can't think about 5 years from now. That's not real to me yet.
Yeah. Wake me up
And
when
that,
they're mass producing these things, right?
hmm yeah, and it's just one of those things that you eventually learn. You figure out what you can control now, and then figure out what you can work on for the future. But you can't live in the past, and you can't live so far in the future that you're hoping you're going to be running again.
Yeah, the here and now. The here and
Hmm.
now is where we have to focus on that, and it's easier said than done.
I'm absolutely going to be following up with you after this to talk about the peer mentorship program because, we talked about how, so many spinal cord injuries, are men or are people who are, older in life and things like that. And while we all have so many similarities, people who are young or, women who get injured, they're not going to see a lot of people like them out there. And
Right.
so I would love to get involved because I think that, we need more and more bodies that are going to be able to represent, what we're seeing
Yes.
in the mirror.
And shared experiences are huge. That's the
Mm-hmm.
whole backbone of the peer mentoring program is that,
Mm-hmm.
been there and done that. And again, not to put a smiley face on it like, hey, you're going to be great and you're going to love being in a wheelchair. I remember there was somebody early on that was one of the mentors went in the room with me and was like, you know what? I wouldn't change anything. I love my life. And I'm just like, wait a minute. What? I don't hate my life and I don't want to, do anything drastic. But if you gave me the opportunity to change what happened to me, dude, I'm jumping
Mm-hmm.
on that. I would change it in a heartbeat. We all would. But
Well,
it's not the end of the world, is what we're trying to get
right.
across.
And that is an interesting question. I've asked this of a couple of other people before. Is, if it would come to going back and making sure it never happened in the first place, like if you could have a time machine and go back and make it never happen in the first place, or if the change would be to, be rehabilitated and be cured or whatever it is, which of those would you choose? And I think that's always an interesting question for people.
It is, yeah. We had a young man recently who was in a diving accident and
Mhm.
initially was paralyzed from the neck down. And Laura, I swear to you, within maybe a week to a week and a half, I mean, he was like completely fine. I mean, he walked out of Kessler as if there was nothing wrong with him. And he neurologically today, other than the fact that sometimes when he looks down really fast, like this way,
Mhm.
he gets like electric charges through like his arms and things like that.
Okay.
He's almost completely healed again. I mean, talk about being touched from whatever higher
Yeah.
power you believe in. This is like a miracle. He's an absolute miracle, man, because he was a C4. And he was in the pool. He was at the bottom. He almost drowned, and his friends got him out. And he's a miracle man. Like when I came in with Jochen to visit with him, he was
Mhm.
laying in the bed, and I just walked in, and like I do with all the people that I first encounter, I introduce myself.
Mhm.
Hey, I'm John, and this is my service dog Jochen. Laura, this guy popped out of the bed and was sitting Indian style on the ground
Oh,
within about 3 seconds, and I'm like, wait a minute, don't, because you're not going to be able to get up, and I'm going to be in so much trouble. You're on the floor if they come in and see you on the. He was like almost fine. It was
wow.
unbelievable.
The
Yeah.
healing power of Yokin, right?
Yeah, exactly. I have to
For
start
those of you who
rubbing
have
his
not
head
seen,
more.
John Service Dog Yokin is a yellow Labrador who's very sweet.
Yes,
And I know I used to make it a priority to come and see you in your office on days when I need a little pick me up from Yokin.
he's good at that.
Um, but no, I mean that's one of those incredible stories that you hear on the news, and when you get into inpatient therapy, everyone's hoping to be that story,
Right.
and unfortunately, that's not the case for everyone,
Yeah,
and thank goodness for him. But
it's
everybody has to
unbelievable.
come to terms with the fact that that may not be your story.
Right. And one thing, usually the final question that I ask folks when I have them on
Mhm.
my podcast is, and it's an interesting story. It came about, I was sitting in the hallway at Kessler waiting for a doctor's appointment, that long hallway down there near
Mhm.
urology. And I was sitting with, this is a crazy story, a good friend of mine who was a couple of years older than me in high school. He was a good friend back in the day. He unfortunately had a really bad spinal cord injury about 10 or 12 years ago. So, almost 30 years after, or 20 years after I had had mine. And he was in a power chair and he really couldn't do much of anything. And he was waiting for an appointment as well. So the two of us are sitting there. And I just sort of matter of factly said, hey, Tommy, we used to call him T. I said, hey, T, if I could snap my fingers right now and you would be completely able bodied again, what do you think the first thing you would do? What would
Mhm.
be the first thing that you would do? And I could see the smoke pouring out of his ears as he's thinking of something. And then it was the cutest thing from behind me. There was this older woman, and she said, I would go out in my garden and I would plant some flowers. And then there was a guy in front of me said, I used to love working on my car. I'd get in the garage and I would tinker with my car. And I'm like, whoa, this is kind of an interesting question. And the thing was that
Mhm.
everybody's got an answer, and everybody's answer is going to be pretty much different. And so I thought it was a pretty cool thing. So not that
Mhm.
I know this is your show, but if I could ask Laura Taylor one
Definitely
question, what do you think the first thing that you would do is if you were completely able-bodied right now, what's the first thing?
go dancing. That's an easy one. Go dancing, because I grew up, dancing, and I always loved it, and I always loved, dancing with my husband, and it's one of those things I definitely miss the most is when I see people dancing in TV shows and movies and at weddings. I'm just like, oh God, I definitely want that to be me. But
I know. Yeah. Very cool. And yeah, I've had folks go to, mine was always like I'd like to get my headphones on and go out for a run and just get a real good
mm,
sweat going. And then I've had people say they'd like to, as you said, dance with their wife or hug
mhm.
their children. And I've had some people say they wanted to go back to mountain climbing. And I don't, do you know Eric LeGrand? Eric was
No.
injured. He was hurt on the field at Rutgers. He's the football player. He's one of the big Reeve Foundation folks, and he
Oh, right.
told me, he said, John, the first thing you really want to know, he said, this is a PG show, but he said, I would run out my front door butt naked up and down the street and tell everybody, hey, look at me, I'm good again. And so there's a
That's
lot
true.
of
With going
cool
dancing,
answers.
I would put on a pair of high heels and a short skirt and go
There
dancing.
you go.
That's definitely
You
part of
go
it.
on Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, and what would you do? What's your answer?
It's changed for me. Early on, it would have been, go out for the run and get a sweat going. But, you know, nowadays, over the years, it's morphed into something as I don't want to say crude or whatever, but standing in front of the toilet and emptying my
Mm,
bladder on my own
true.
without any issues, or you know where I'm coming from. I mean, and
Oh, yeah.
people listening to this probably feel the same way. I had that same friend who used to call
Hmm.
me point 0.5 back in the day. He told me that he would check into a hotel and stay in like the penthouse suite of a hotel and sleep in the bed and not have to have people come in and roll him every 4 hours, and then take a shower like every hour on the hour on
Hmm.
his own, and clean himself up and do all the
Hmm.
luxuries of a nice shower. And I mean, it's just stuff
Yeah,
like
the
that
luxuries of
people.
privacy that we do tend to lose with these injuries.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to sleep on my stomach just once. I mean, I have to
Mm-hmm.
wear I wear a night bag. I have to wear a condom catheter at night. Luckily, during the day, I don't have to worry about issues with that. But at nighttime, because I don't know when I'm going, I would be going on. So I've been sleeping on my back for 32 years.
Hmm.
I'd like to roll on my side or sleep on my stomach, and just those little creature comforts of the life that we used to live, that would be fun to have again.
That's true. That is one of those things that I always tell my friends is, enjoy those little moments where you get to roll over in bed and do a big stretch. Those
Yeah,
little moments really, they matter. And when you don't have them anymore, it's sad. So,
it is.
take those moments and just enjoy them for me.
It's the truth. It really
Hmm.
is. It's like the old cliche. I mean, we've talked about cliches all day long.
Hmm.
It's the simple things. It really is the simple things in life that you really truly miss, and you hope that those of us out there that are
Hmm.
have the ability to enjoy them really do, and
Yeah.
they take that they don't take them for granted.
That's very true. And, hopefully with getting them more involved in the programs and things that Kessler has, I can work with you and we can find more of those simple things for people who need it.
No doubt, no doubt. You would be a great asset to have as someone who is fighting a fight that is unenviable. I mean, nobody wants to be in your shoes or my shoes, but the fact
Yeah.
that you're facing it with such grace and with such humility, and
Thank
we
you.
need people like you, and you're really a good voice to
Mhm.
have in this community.
Well, and that's why you were one of the first people I thought of when we started talking about these interviews, because I've heard your show and that you've talked to so many people. And it's not a club any of us wanted to join, but I think it's a club that we're all proud to be a part of. And I thank you so much for taking all this time and talking to me about all this.
Yeah, we're trying to do our part. We're absolutely
Hmm.
trying to do our part. We're paying it forward, as they like to say. And if I could just mention, if people are interested in
Yes.
listening to the podcast, you can find it. It's at www.quadcast.org, and it's QUADCAST.org. And what I like to say is that while it's mainly for and about folks like us who have had their lives affected by a spinal cord injury, it's really for anybody who just wants to be inspired, because I bring on some really cool people who have had some really terrible things happen to them, and yet have gone on to either invent companies or multimillionaires or start businesses, and just really
Mhm.
haven't gone down the rabbit hole, but have gone the other way and have made the most of their plight. And
Mhm.
oftentimes it's in really tough situations, but they've done
Yeah,
some really good things, and it's nice to highlight folks like that.
definitely. And I'll link everything down in the show notes so everybody knows where to find you. But thank you so much.
Laura, I thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. You're welcome. And if I can do anything to help you or anybody else in the future, please give me a shout, because I'm all ears.
Wonderful. So I'm sure you and I will be in contact soon. So you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Okay, Laura, you as well.
Okay.